ilikuwa saa 1, ilikuwa inaelekea saa 2. Sasa nimetumwa na customer kupeleka vitu pale Fahari pale. Sasa wakati nilikuwa naenda, tukakutana na watu wakiwa wanakimbia wakija hivi, wakitoka kule Bashir wakija hivi. So mimi nilikuwa nimefika pale phase 6 na kuna gari ilikuwa mbele yangu. So kufika pale kwa kona, ile gari ikapigwa panga ile gari. Ule jamaa gari akatani. Yote vile ametani, ikabidi hata mimi ni tani. Sasa vile nimetani ndio wenzangu wakatokelezea sasa wa pikipiki. Wakati wamekuja ndio tukaanza kuwafuata sasa. Sasa tumewafuata wakaingia na ile njia kuingia Majambo pale Fahari pale. Sasa wakati wameingia pale wakapata kuna kanda ilikuwa shukisha mbao pale. Sasa wakakata jamaa mmoja mkono, alafu kuna mmoja amekatwa, kuna mmoja tumempata kwa ile nyumba ilikuwa yajengwa, amekatwa ameanguka chini. So sasa kufika pale kulikuwa na ziwa, pikipiki hazingepita. Sasa vile kulikuwa na ziwa pale ikabidi tukose vile tunaweza wafuata huko mbele tena.
Wale walikuweko walisema walikuwa watu karibu 10 na walikuwa wamejihami na panga, na ndani ya watu 10 tayari tumepata 3 ambaye tuna matumaini watapea wapelelezi wetu habari muhimu ambaye itasaidia wapelelezi wetu kuweza kupata wahusika wote wanaohusika kwa mambo hayo.
So 3 people have already been arrested. We do know that there are individuals who are also in hospital nursing serious injuries. So this is the origin of this entire story. Yesterday at about 9:50, 9:30, there were reports of an attack in Mombasa, Bamburi to be specific. What we do know right now is that that attack was carried out by Wakali Kwanza group. And the thing that concerns anyone who's been following this story is the age group of the individuals in this particular groups. We're looking at 15-year-olds, 17, 19, 20-year-olds, and you're looking at young men who perhaps have no regard for life whatsoever. And we're trying to figure out what exactly is driving these gangs in Mombasa. I remember in September last year, there was another attack and an old man was killed in that particular attack. So what is this about these gangs that makes it impossible to get rid of them? What is this that they're fighting for? Because there have been indications that perhaps there is someone who is funding these groups. What we do know is that the attack that happened yesterday happened at night, and these young men were being driven in a car. So going through the streets and slashing anyone and everyone they came across. And that is a concern because security is the role and the function of the national government. So for the residents of Mombasa, they would want to know that they are safe, that the security personnel in Mombasa will keep them safe, that these gangs will not determine whether or not they leave. That is what we're talking about this evening on The Big Story. So let me bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna. Sophia, good evening. I did mention that this is not the first attack. In September last year, there's an old man that was killed, and there have been previous attacks before that. At some point, we do know the police were saying they are going to look for the leaders of these particular gangs. But what is it that is so special about these gangs that is also impossible to get rid of them? And what does this say about the youth in Mombasa, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and what are the security personnel not doing that perhaps they should be able to do to make sure these gangs do not terrorize the residents in Mombasa? Those are some of the questions that we're trying to answer this evening. Sophia.
Good evening, Linda. Indeed, a worrying situation coming from Mombasa County. Those reports of this marauding youth going on rampage, attacking anyone they came across between 8 and 9 p.m. last evening. At least 13 people injured in those attacks. They were wielding machetes and indiscriminately going at anyone who they came across. And as you mentioned, last year as well, reports of the same gang. But what I found interesting, just looking back at how this Wakali gang, there's apparently Wakali Kwanza, Wakali Wao as well from Mombasa County, is that back in 2016, this we're talking about 3 years back, the police in that region had asked for them to surrender because, again, they were on the rampage, attacking people, robberies with violence. And so that this has yet to come to an end in as far as being dealt with conclusively in a manner that will ensure the residents of Mombasa County are safe going about their business. Remember, these are huge huge tourist destination for Kenya, so that's significant, but also just for the locals themselves, because yesterday after those attacks and reports of the same spread, business completely came to a halt, and some continue to nurse injuries, serious injuries, at the Coast General Hospital. I have with me Byron Adera. He's Kenya Special Forces, ex-Kenya Special Forces, and also the country spokesperson of Association of Corporates and Industrial Security Management Professionals. Thank you for making time for us, Byron. Let's try to put this into perspective, because let's begin with the attacks, just the brazen nature in which these young people, we're hearing about 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds, get on to the streets of Mombasa wielding machetes, attacking anybody at will. This is a country governed by rule of law, but that this is happening is very worrying, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is absolutely worrying, because if you have a look at the way the gang went about their business of attacking individuals who are going about their businesses, as every other Kenyan would normally do, it is worrying, because it almost seemed like there was total breakdown of security. These are things that you'd watch on in movies or on TV about some very ungovernable or ungoverned spaces here on earth. We are talking about places that are absolutely reeling in lawlessness. But, we are treated to this happening within these spaces and the borders of Kenya. And for that matter, it's in Kisauni and it's in Mombasa County. Yeah. We are borrowing from, a history. The history of the criminal gangs is the graveyard of the abandoned lessons about the same. Because if you're talking about a body that has now morphed from Wakali Kwanza, Wakali Kwawa, and whatever it is, then it means that there's some little space for operation. And these are guys that, notwithstanding the formation in terms of the individuals that are in that criminal gang, then the ideology is still reeling and of course, is gaining traction. There's some momentum that is picked up by either new individuals that are, being conscripted into this team and or influenced to be part of this criminal gang without as much as, deterrence factors. If we are talking about the whole sum total of security, safety, prevention, and defense, this can be summed up in one sweeping statement, total situational awareness. So we are looking at this as a breakdown in total situational awareness on the part of the machinery that are supposed to address this, and ideally on the part of the populace that perhaps is forming part of the reservoir that ensures that there's living human beings that can still be influenced to join this kind of criminal gang.
Yeah, and what's worrying, Byron, is that you have a whole security apparatus at the county level, the county commissioner being at the head of that, and sub-county and all of these police officers. And as I was preparing just for this interview, just seeing that this traces back even to 2016, clearly somebody's sleeping on the job, because we cannot be saying and asking gangs to surrender. Surely something is fueling them to go about their activities. So to come back and sit and imagine they will just come and say, oh, this morning we have come to surrender. It is quite unbelievable that the security forces get to that point, that then they just sit back. Is it a worrying issue in your view to that extent?
Yes, it's a worrying issue, yes, but it's not surprising to me, because the answers are here with us. You and I could be beating our heads against the trees and the walls, wondering how this could actually be happening under the noses of security officers, of security machinery that are charged with the sole business of ensuring that this doesn't happen. Or at least if it does, then we can raise our hands up in the air and say, that was just one of those unfortunate situations. But that was not one of them. As I said, the graveyard of the abandoned fads and the lessons do belong to, the criminal gangs themselves, as you can trace all the way back to, the teens, right? So yes, we could partly be sleeping on the job, but there's deeper issues to this. Just being very ambitious and appearing really nice on TV and dropping big names and tough words like, we want you to come out and stand up top of the highest, the tallest trees in Mombasa and denounce this group will not solve the situations. We are being very simplistic. The social, psychological, psychosocial learnings that we've had and been exposed to. Is there a psychological background or part to this that we can draw lessons from? Yes, absolutely. In 1982, Magaji, came up with a framework for analysis of vast array of psychosocial factors that can actually make factors or things that happen in societies criminogenic in nature. And it talked about the instigators to acts of aggression, added to, stimuli in the external environment that would inhibit those acts of aggression, plus a bit strength factors. If these factors are to weigh inhibitions to acts of aggression, plus the stimuli in the external environment that would then, not facilitate but inhibit acts of aggression, then criminal, acts of criminality and aggression would occur. Do we have those factors in the external environment? Yes. We are assailed by, a plethora of these factors in the external environment. So talk about joblessness, and people are talking about them among the youth. Talk about, drug and alcohol abuse. This is, reeling in completely different in Russia, and the whole world is perhaps going in a completely different direction in Kenya. We're talking about, just the breakdown in moral fabric. And of course, Mombasa is awash with those opportunities if you are to look and shake a stick at any one of those opportunities. So we have, and then the stimuli in the external environment. Do we have such? Yes, we do have people who made it, because we are exposed to appreciating that success can be, pegged on the shoulders of things like guys who driving big cars, but somehow they just made it. They didn't go to school. So illegitimate behavior that has now been, accepted by the society. So anybody would want to get there. But of course, now we've had to internalize illegitimate behavior and delinquency and acts of aggression and criminality as innovative ways to get there. So this is what is happening. These are things that you cannot sort out by saying, oh, let's go out there and tell them to stand on top of the biggest or the tallest trees and denounce the criminal gang. These are things that you do not sort out by saying, oh yes, this operation is going to go down for the next 12 hours and we're going to arrest the 7 remaining members of the 10. Already we are missing the brief by a big margin because we are making it look less, so we are making the society, to make the society be comfortable and happy that we are in control. But those are symptoms of a zombie organization, an organization that is missing the point of the proper review of their interpretation of internal, confidence, competencies, capacities. We are coming off the blocks from 2017 when our police was rated third worst by the, WISP, World Internal Security and Police Index. And 2 major bodies, did give this report, out for the general public's consumption. And they were measured against such work streams as, processes, capacity, legitimacy, and then outcomes. Now, from my stand, I'm thinking outcomes. Now, we saw guys being beaten, being cut into pieces, being attacked by a criminal gang that have a name. We have a breakdown in intelligence, perhaps, that did not capture this well in time to have averted this kind of attack. And then we have, because this area is also governable, and for sure there's a Bamburi police station next, there's a chief's camp somewhere. These are guys who would have sprung into action. And we're thinking this went on for some time. People are happily taking videos that are now floating on social media. That is enough time to have a proper response, put in place, and guys would be sprinting off to that place to address it. Assuming this is one of those opportunities that just slipped, through your fingers, but it's not.
Yeah, and just even having names like Wakali, Wao, Wale Wabaya, whatever the case, it's almost normalizing it, that we know them well enough to even name them and tag them. So it's not your one-off incident of insecurity. It's that we know this is a group of people that do and conduct whatever kind of crimes. But talk to me about, I listened to the police boss from the region saying that the 3 that were arrested at the time, they were found with phones which they, when asked to open them, could not open. And so they then suspected they were behind the attacks yesterday. So this, what ordinarily one maybe argue and describe them as petty thieves, that they'll go grab phones, handbags here and there, but they're also, attacking people. People slashed their hands, their heads, as well, and being treated in hospital. But reconcile that for me from a security perspective with hearing that they're funded by influential individuals, because that's what we've had police say in the past, that they believe they are funded. So how do you fund these people and who are engaging in these petty criminal activities that could also lead to harmful cases like we are seeing people being treated, but also to death? What do they seek to benefit?
We know from experience, and we are benefited by a bit of intellectual power that hangs around us, that you cannot hold and talk with sheep. You have to have the brief right to get to the right solutions, and part of doing that is to get, not be, chained or shackled by false sense of self. And perhaps some of those things happen because people are suffering from very disastrous patterns of human behavior. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Mombasa, and we're pretty aware of them. One of them is, politicians could weigh in and have criminal gangs for protection of this area or that area. I know of an area called Palestine, just around, Bamburi area, and as you go really to the interior, where some particular individuals live, and of course they've had to now have a criminal gang to protect them. Of course, the whole country is awash with some of those, names, Chinkororo and all the rest of it. And people know those names. But what then would really shock you and sound very rational is how they would do their businesses in the open, and no one seems to understand. Now, we have the benefit of psychosocial, theories that have been put together, and the benefit from factors such as, social inequalities, social location, and we have social, the labeling sort of. So we have a group of people that, Robert Merton in 1938, 1957, Anomi's strain theory, talked about deviant behavior and how does this then happen. So he says deviant behavior happens when conventional aspirations of individuals, exceed the level of satisfaction that's only possible by legitimate behavior. Now, when we start to internalize illegitimate behavior, among all of us, politicians are thinking, how do we then protect our interest? Oh, by having the criminal gangs protect our interest, because we are nasty business there, we're doing some other nasty business over there. And of course, we don't want the government to weigh in, and of course, money and success is power. So these individuals are being taken advantage of, and of course, the society is full of those opportunities. We have, unemployment rates are pretty high in Mombasa, so you have the labor to lay your hands on. So when these people don't have the steady stream of money, perhaps the government has weighed in on your nasty businesses and you are corrupt and they've locked you, frozen your account, so you're not able to pay them. These people have had to have some continuity. So how do they have that continuity? If an opportunity presents itself, if they were attacking someone because of some other thing, and they basically found, oh, this person has a phone in their hands and this can be sold for a penny or two, then they're going to do that. So these are just a consequence of deeper issues that have got to be, taken care of, not just by this kind of simplistic and knee-jerk approaches that we are seeing being demonstrated.
Yeah. Finally and briefly, it's not just an issue of Mombasa in this particular incident. We have heard of gangs elsewhere. A few months back, we're talking about Western Kenya, where they were killing people, these orgies of death we kept witnessing. So there is a deeper problem. So for you, what needs to happen? Because at the end of the day, it's Wanjiku who's been terrorized.
We need to sit down with ourselves and have a look at ourselves and start to think about ourselves as being involved in something that's bigger than ourselves. And with that kind of an assumption in itself, we will have our attention shored up and our interpretation of the way we get involved in situations broadened. In terms of the scope of work, the police have got to be thinking that they need the bigger majority of the people, that is the populace itself, to be on board. So how do they encourage a full buy-in? They've got to apply themselves to this, to their works by having a look at how best to do their jobs without disenfranchising the populace, without discouraging, without frustrating others even more. That speaks to the fact that the society is not in need of extrajudicial killings and unexplained killings. You're not going to kill an ideology that way. You are not going to address the problems, the precursors of this people getting into criminal gangs, which are unemployment, maybe frustration with the governance in that space, maybe the fact that they are angered, and maybe they need of money. That is a motivation as well. Maybe you need to address the stimuli in the external environment that get fed into these people, and they feed off their energies, which is they're seeing several people that are getting away with huge crimes, so talk of corruption. So could we have a look at how then corruption could also be a leading cause of some of these things that are happening? Because people are watching this space and they're saying, if he got away with that, then why not? We are committing lesser offenses. We are committing lesser sins. But no sin is too less to get addressed by robust measures, by having people, reinvigorating their efforts and applying a lot of, cognition. The sum total of an organization's power is the bench strength of its management, and that power comes from people continuously applying themselves to ways and means that are praised over time, changed. We need to change our tactics. We need to have a look at how then situations that were really getting controlled by some measures last year are not responding to the same measures this year. So we could be providing yesterday's answers to today's problems, and that by a big margin. In a sense, we are brilliantly executing the wrong vision.
All right. Thank you very much. Baron Adara, a very good point he makes there about impunity, that when it's witnessed at a higher level, even at the political level, the impact it could have, even with these young people, the issues they are grappling with at a local level in that region. Could they be playing out to fuel this? But Linda, as you continue with the conversation, one of the aspects that we did not get to touch on that's also critical is the role of the community, policing, information, and passing that on to the relevant authorities. Because at the end of the day, this children or kids or youth who go to homes, the community will know them, they will interact with them. So do they get to report when they witness the suspicious activities to the police and have that kind of engagement between the authorities and the communities to avert the kind of situation that was witnessed last night, Linda?
To make the community part of this conversation, because ultimately this war will not be won without involving the community. And it's important to mention that on this particular show, we are speaking to Lucy Chizi Chireri. She's the MCA Mtopanga. We'll also be speaking to George Msamali, who is here in studio with me. George, hang on, give me a few minutes. I need to speak to Lucy because she's a resident in Mombasa. She's an MCA on the ground, and she has a better grasp of perhaps what is really the problem with all this. Mheshimiwa, habari ya jioni na kushukuru kwa kutuongelesha katika runinga ya KTN News. Kwanza kabisa ningependa kujua maoni yako kuhusu mashambulizi ya jana usiku. Mheshimiwa, unanisikia? Mheshimiwa Chizi, waweza nisikia? All right, give me a few minutes. We're trying to see if we can get Lucy Chizi Chireri, who's the MCA Mtopanga. But as we wait to see if we can get to speak to her, let me engage George Msamali as well. Msamali, just listening into that conversation that Sophia had with Byron Odera, what comes to mind? You have an attack, perhaps for someone who's looking at this attack that happened yesterday, it's a picture of an emboldened group. I mean, people who come out with machetes and pangas and they're slashing everyone along the way. And the most painful bit for me, Msamali, is that these are 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. What does that speak to the state of the youth in Mombasa?
Aline, I think there's a total breakdown of security as is related to the youth of this country currently. And you'll find that this is not the only emerging group that we are witnessing, because in Nairobi we had a group that is operating in Kayole known as the Gaza. We have the Wakaliwao in Mombasa. And if you look at the age bracket, it means that we are not getting it right somewhere, because this is what we call juvenile delinquency. And how do we deal with this when it comes up? It means like what we are always left reacting to issues as opposed to being proactive, because this is not the first time that we've been told that these gangs are operating in Mombasa. We have these kind of gangs also operating in Nairobi. But every other time that we have this kind of an incident, we'll find that the police top brass will come out and tell us like, we are going to take action, we've arrested people. How do you arrest a person with a phone that you cannot switch on and claim that this is a member of the gang? Is that evidence enough that will stand before court? No. So I think we need to do something more in dealing with these gangs as opposed to what we are doing currently. We need to strategize, come up with solutions, as opposed to now having these knee-jerk reactions that we're witnessing every other time that we witness this kind of an attack in the country.
Maybe because I want to get solutions from you, and I want to get that reaction from the police force as well. How well are they handling this? Like you say, these are knee-jerk reactions. This happened in September last year. There were previous attacks again. So every time this happens, you get the police calling for a press briefing and saying, we are on top of this. And a couple of months later, the same gangs, and these are youth. I mean, what is it about the police force that is unable to contain these gangs? So stay with me. But right now we had this conversation and we said it's important to involve the community. So perhaps let's listen into a community leader from Mombasa, and we're speaking to Lucy Chizi Chireri. She's the MCA Mtopanga. Mheshimiwa, habari ya jioni, nashukuru kwa kutuongelesha katika runinga ya KTN News. Kwanza kabisa ningependa kujua maoni yako kuhusu mashambulizi ya jana usiku.
Maoni yangu kuhusu mashambulizi ya jana usiku, kwanza ningesema pole sana kwa wakaaji wa Kisauni. Maoni yangu ni kuwa serikali ishuke chini mashinani, ishirikiane serikali ya kaunti na serikali kuu kuweza kuangalia hasa hili tatizo latoka wapi, tuweze kusaidia wananchi. Gharama za maisha zimekuwa juu, wazazi kwa kusema ukweli wanashindwa na hawa watoto. Nikisema wanashindwa, nimesema gharama ya maisha iko juu. Pili, nitaingilia kwa mzazi. Mimi ni mzazi, lakini wazazi wenzangu, tuzungumze na watoto wetu. Hawa wanaofanya haya si watoto wakubwa, ni watoto wa umri mdogo. Ni watoto wa umri mdogo. Mtoto akitoka kwao usiku, mzazi ni lazima ujue ameenda wapi. Na hawa watoto je, wanasoma ama hawasomi? Mimi nitasema mzazi ndio wa kwanza kulaumiwa. Nikisema gharama ya maisha imetuzidi, hakuna kazi nzuri ambao wazazi wako nazo. Maisha yao ni Mungu mwenyewe kupenda kufuga hawa watoto ama kulea watoto. Kwa hivyo serikali iangalie hili tatizo.
Leo anakusikia, maana unasema nishati serikali ishuke chini mashinani, kisha yasema shida labda ni wazazi ambao hawajui watoto wao wako wapi. Lakini ukiangalia vizuri kuna wale ambao wanasema pia polisi unakulaumiwa, manake hizi vikundi si vya jana, vimekuwa miaka 2-3 iliyopita.
Ndiyo, polisi wakulaumiwa ama wasilaumiwe. Kungekuwa kuna mawasiliano. Serikali imeanzia chini. Tuko na wazee wa mitaa, tuko na polisi, tuko na machifu na wazazi. Nikisema washuke chini, wazee wa mitaa wanaelewa katika mitaa yao ni kijana gani, ni mtoto wa nani, wapeane ile information. Hata polisi pia wanashindwa, manake polisi yuko kule, lakini ujue chini yuko mzee wa mtaa, yuko mzazi. Ingekuwa hii information wanaipeana, unajua mtoto wako kama amekushinda huambiwa umpeane kwa serikali. Kule kwa serikali lazima atapata mafunzo, ziko approved school. Hao watoto ni wadogo, wamefanya haya, wakipelekwa approved school watafundishwa njia, discipline watafundishwa. Lakini pia hao askari nao wameshindwa sababu hakuna information ambayo inatokea huku chini. Ni watu wanaogopa kupeana information kwa serikali. Mtoto wa fulani ana hivi na hivi, hiyo information haifiki, na ikifika watoto wakibebwa wakipelekwa ndani hakuna ushahidi wowote. Watu wanaogopa kupeleka ushahidi kwa serikali. Polisi tutawalaumu kweli, lakini pia nao information kwao ni kidogo sababu ya wazazi. Mzazi anatetea mtoto wake.
Kwa hivyo hivi, kwa mtazamo wako, wasema wazee wa mitaa nishati wafanye kazi na polisi, labda hiyo ni suluhu moja ambayo tunaweza tumia kuangalia kwamba hivi vikundi vinaangamizwa. Kwa mtazamo wako tena, ni ipi ama ni njia ipi ambayo tutatumia kuangamiza vikundi hivi na ensure that hizi haya mashambulizi hayaendelei Mombasa?
Nyuma kuna lile swala tulikuwa na community policing. Hawa walikuwa wakifanya kazi, lakini wakati huu sijaona community policing ikifanya kazi. Huo wakati wa nyuma haya magengi yalinyamaza sababu ya community policing, wakiwa na uhusiano mzuri na wazee wa mitaa na wakaaji. Lakini community policing hakuna, watu wameogopa kwa sababu wale walikuwa wanachukua yote ambayo wanaletewa, information yoyote wanashirikiana na askari.
Nashukuru sana kwa mtazamo wako. Suluhu ni wazee wa mitaa wafanye kazi pamoja na polisi pamoja na wakazi pia. Nashukuru kwa muda wako kwa kutuongelesha katika runinga ya KTN News. Nashukuru sana Lucy Chizi Chireri, MCA Mtopanga, mwakilishi wa ward ya Mtopanga. Thank you so much. So we're having a conversation about the terror gangs in Mombasa. We all saw the breaking news yesterday in the evening. 3 people have so far been arrested. About 8 were injured yesterday in the evening. That's our top story, our big story this evening. Which way to solve out this gang problem in Mombasa? So let's take a break. When we come back, then we'll engage George Musamali, who's a security analyst in studio with me.